What's up guys? Today we're going to be installing our low profile fender flares on this Honda Talon 1000X4. Let's get right to it. So the first thing you want to do is go ahead and remove all the contents from your packaging. What makes it easier for me is just kind of separating everything out. We have our push pins, we have our spacers, we have our fender washers over here, we have our washers for our bolts, we have our short bolts, and then we have our long bolts. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and grab our passenger side flare. It'll look just like this here. And as you can see, it's cut for the contours of the factory fender. So we've previously had our low profile fender flares installed on this machine. So we already have our holes drilled and everything, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna show you exactly how to get this oriented and where to mark your holes and how to drill them. So if you look like this, you take this lower section, it kind of fits right into this contour. So what you wanna do is get it as tight as possible to where it's fitting really good, laying on the contours nicely, and then you would just mark your hole. So what I'd usually do is take a paint marker, get it lined up exactly where we want it. Just kind of hold it in place, and then you just reach through your hole, mark all of your holes on your fender, and then drill them. So I usually try to start at the top. This hole right here is where we usually start. What we do is we go ahead and mark it. We would take our drill, and this is a 17/64 drill bit. So we drill our hole. Like I said, we already have our holes drilled. You should have yours drilled at this time as well. You're going to take your push pin, line it up, just go ahead and install it. So at this point, we still have some movement with our flare, and we just want to make sure that it lays out good all the way across and it's fitting nice and tight. That's the most important part about these flares, is getting them to fit nice and look nice on your machine. So once you've done that, we'll go ahead and grab our paint marker again. So once you've done that, you grab your paint marker again, and I like to line this hole up down here. Before we do that, we just want to kind of lay our flare up into place, make sure it's going to lay out how it's supposed to, which it is. So then we would mark this hole. And then you can just kind of rotate your flare out of the way, drill the hole, grab another push pin, install it there. So now for the rest of these holes, you have something to kind of hold your flare in place. So we're just going to go through and just start drilling all of our holes. So once all the lower holes are drilled, just go through, install all of your push pins into these holes here. So just like that. So at this point, your flare should look identical to ours, and we're going to move up here to the top. You just want to make sure that this lip right here on your factory fender lines up perfectly with your flare, or if anything, it needs to be kind of dropped in behind just a touch, but you don't want it too far over, which would be in, or you don't want it too far out. Just want to make sure that it lines up just perfectly. Just want to make sure that you push your fender flare back as far as you can into the contour of the factory fender, so you can see it kind of rolls back. You want to make sure that your flare is fitting nice and tight into that corner. So what I like to do here is, once I know where my flare needs to be, I like to take a drill bit. This is my 17/64, and just go ahead and get it started through the flare, just like this. So you're going to push your flare back, make sure it's lined up exactly how it's supposed to be, and then just go ahead and drill one hole right through the fender, just like that. So once we've done that, we can go ahead and get our hardware started through and go ahead and get the nut on the bottom side here, and that's going to hold this back in position, tucked back where we need it, so the rest of our holes are going to line up perfectly. So this hole here is gonna match up to this hole, and then again, we already had the flares installed, so none of these holes will be drilled just yet. We're only focusing on this hole and this hole. So you're gonna take your long hardware and your SuperATV washer. You're gonna go ahead and drop it down through this hole right here. Then what we're gonna do is grab one of our spacers. We're gonna take the spacer and slide it onto the hardware. And we're gonna take our flare and line it up. And if you drilled this to where it put enough tension on this flare to get it in the corner as tight as you can, it'll kind of sit there and hold itself. You're still gonna have to hold the flare just a touch. Then what we're gonna do is grab one of our flat washers and nylock nuts. And we're gonna take the flat washer and slide it onto our bolt. And then go ahead and just start your nut. And if you put enough tension, you're gonna see that your hardware is angled. That's what you want. You want it to be angled back towards the front. That means that whenever you tighten this up, it's gonna tuck that fender flare in very nicely. So now that you have your nut started, if you got your fender drilled correctly, if it's sitting in a resting state, it should be angling the hardware that way. That way, whenever you tuck it back in this corner, see our hardware drops in and it lays perfectly flat. And as you can see, we're following the contour perfectly. And that's exactly what you want it to look like. That's gonna give you the best fit up, the best look on your machine. So after you've done that, you're just gonna go through and continue drilling your holes. What I like to do is kind of take my body a little bit and kind of push the fender flare back. That way we know our hardware is straight here. Then we're gonna drill through the bottom holes, which are gonna be the holes on your flare, just as we did previously with this hole. And just keep doing the same process. You're gonna drill, put hardware in, drill, put hardware in, drill, and put hardware in. And then, once you have all the hardware in, we'll tuck it back as far as we can. Drill your hole. We'll pop our bolt through, put our spacer in between the flare and the factory fender. Just like this. You have to kind of hold it up. Grab your flat washer as well as your nylock nut. Get it started. Line it up. Then one last time, get everything where it's supposed to be and go ahead and drill your hole. Then just tuck your flare back and we're gonna go through and fully tighten all our hardware up here. So now that we have the front installed, we're gonna go ahead and move on to the back. The first thing you wanna do on the back side of the machine is you see you have your factory flare. This push pin right here is gonna need to be removed in order to install our flare. This push pin right here is gonna be the one that we're gonna go ahead and remove. Take our push pin removal tool, go ahead and remove it and set it aside. So once we've went ahead and removed our factory push pin, we're gonna take the same hardware that we previously used on the front flare and use it in the same hole here. So again, we have our long Allen, our washer here. We're gonna take our spacer, slide it on the back side. We're gonna take our flare, so next thing we're gonna do is go ahead and grab one of our short Allens as well as one of our washers just like we've been using. And then we're gonna get the passenger side rear plate. And we're gonna line our hardware up with the hole in this plate. So we'll kind of rotate it here so you can see what we're doing. So essentially all we've done here is just popped our hardware through and attach it to our plate. You wanna make sure that this is for whichever side you're working on, which again, we are working on the passenger side at this time. Let's go ahead and get our nut started. Then we'll just repeat the same steps to the other hole. And then there'll be a third hole. You're not gonna wanna put your hardware in that hole yet. This one right here, you do not put your hardware in. So then we're just gonna rotate it, just like so. We're gonna take it and we're gonna tuck it into our fender nicely. So that way it lines up good, has a good finish, good fit and finish. And then as you can see, on your bracket down below here, you have a notch. So what I like to do is go ahead and get this in place. You take your paint marker, tap a mark through this bracket, and then you would drill it. So at this time, you'd want to go ahead and drill your hole. So again, with this being up here, get it lined up where it looks good, has a good finish, and then you would mark your hole, or you could drill straight through, just like that. So what we're gonna do is go ahead and grab one of our short Allens with one of our SuperATV washers, a flat washer, and a nylock nut. We're gonna take our hardware, pop it through the hole that we previously drilled through the plastic. And we're gonna take our bracket, get a flat washer installed, and then our nylock nut. And that's gonna hold everything in place for us. So now that we have our hole drilled, we're gonna take our hardware. Again, this is the same hardware that we used on the front. We have the long Allen, flat washer, spacer, nylock nut. So drop the bolt through. We're gonna grab our spacer, slide it on our threads, and then we will line the threads up with our flare, which will drop through the bracket. So on the bottom side, we'll put our flat washer on, and then take our nylock nut, go ahead and get it started. And then at this point, what I like to do is go ahead and fully tighten the hardware here, 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 and then in the front. So on the bottom side, we'll put our flat washer on, and then take our nylock nut, go ahead and get it started. Now what we're gonna do, once we have our hardware started here, is go through, fully tighten all 3 of our screws here. We'll tighten the one Allen headed screw that we popped through. So now we're just going to go ahead and drill through our plastic for these final 2 holes. So we're just going to align our spacer with the hole and the flare, and then Pop our hardware through the flare, through the fender, out the bottom. Put a big flat washer on the bottom, and then go ahead and start your nylock nut. Then we'll just go ahead and fully tighten our hardware. Just like so. So now all you have to do is repeat the same exact steps for the opposite side. Once you've done that, you've got all your hardware fully tightened. That's all there is to it to install SuperATV's low-profile fender flares on this Honda Talon 1000X4. Be sure to check the description below for a link to pick yours up today. And while you're there, go ahead and drop a like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.